Okay, so for this video, we are going to talk about just a comprehensive guide to finding medium-term renters, who I also happen to call remote workers. We'll talk about that in a second. The reason why I think this guide is important is because I've introduced this idea of investing this kind of medium-term rental model to a lot of my clients, and they have a ton of questions about it because it's a new concept for them. So I'm just going to cover the concepts that we hear about the most and talk about those. Before I get into that though, a couple quick things. First, thank you so much for consuming this content and hopefully liking it. If you want a more curated format of this, I did write a book and it's called American Nomads: Finding and Renting to Remote Workers. I kind of interchange remote workers and the medium-term rental model is basically the same thing, but that book covers everything and it's in one area. It has checklists, etc. You can find it on Amazon and it's also linked below. Since we're talking about content, my husband and I also own a real estate company. We are actively taking on clients and we work with buyers, sellers, investors. If you're looking for anything like that, please reach out. We're always happy to answer questions. And again, like I said, we're taking on new clients, but also if you like podcast content, we put something out once a week that's about a 20-minute short about real estate in the Denver and Colorado Springs markets. Again, linked below. All right, so let's get into this medium-term rental guide. I always feel like it's important when you're talking about medium-term rentals to talk about what it is at that front, because I think people are very familiar with a long-term rental situation and a short-term rental situation. So long-term obviously being like a year-long lease, no furniture, and then a short-term rental situation being more like vacation properties where it's furnished, but typically people are coming in, anywhere between like, let's say 2 days and 7 days. And so you're renting it out. And that's obviously called Airbnb a lot of the time. But people seem very familiar with that. What they're less familiar with is this medium-term rental model. It's a furnished property, but it's 30 plus days. And there's a lot of opportunity in this space. And the reason for that is because more and more remote workers are no longer tied to their jobs. So they can test out different areas that they want to work. And we're seeing this trend happen. So I personally really think that this is going to impact the real estate market. And it's something that investors should definitely be paying attention to. And that's why I'm paying attention to it, is because I work with a lot of investors and a lot of people that have been very happy with Airbnb, like the numbers with it, but they either get burned out on it or the cities change the laws. And so this is a really good thing to transition to, is these furnished rentals that are 30 days or more. For a variety of reasons, they're just easier, they're less work. And typically if the law changes, you're still good because most of the laws are set up where you can't rent for 30 days or less in city code. That is why I like it. It's easier, it's usually legal. And again, I see the demographic for who needs it growing. Okay, so who needs it? I just talked about remote workers. Remote workers are no longer tethered to their jobs. So they can work from anywhere. They can have their job in Buffalo, but work from Denver, Mexico, LA, wherever they want. And so they're obviously the group that I'm paying the most attention to, just because I think they're going to be growing. But there are other cohorts that are also seeking this out, people that are moving to a city that aren't ready to buy yet, but they kind of want to feel out the city. College kids often need spaces that are furnished for a longer lease. I have a different video about this and I will link to it below as well, but there are definitely, there are all sorts of people that need it, but some of them kind of share similar demographics. The first being that usually they're a couple or that they're single. So you don't see people that have kids doing a lot of this remote work situation. And the reason for that is because it's really hard to disrupt your kid's school schedule and whatnot. And so it's typically, again, people that aren't bringing around little kids. I have seen people do it, but the ones I know said that it was quite challenging. And so I think that's why you're seeing that number get reduced, especially too, now that we're all going back to normal schedules since COVID, it is less feasible to take your kid out for a month or two and be somewhere else. So singles or couples, typically they are going to show up with a car. They're not showing up with more than one car, but they typically are coming with a car. They are typically coming with animals. So in the absence of having children, they have fur babies, and you can definitely increase the volume of people that are looking for your rental if you make it pet friendly. And then finally, they tend to be high skilled and high paid. The jobs that lend themselves to remote work or travel, and the kind of people that can sort of afford these types of rentals, typically are high earners. And again, they tend to be high skilled. So that is who would want this 30-day plus furnished medium-term rental. Those are the kinds of different people that are looking for it, and kind of some of the patterns that we see across the different demographics or groups that would want it. We know who they are, but what do they want? The first thing is dedicated workspace. So a dedicated workspace to me means a desk, really strong Wi-Fi. That is more important than anything else. I think in all of your marketing or promotion about your space, you should be talking about the Wi-Fi speed. It's the thing that they are going to care about. So put it in the headline, put it in the first sentence, provide a speed test from whatever your provider is in the photos so that they can see like this place really does have the Wi-Fi. That is going to be more important than anything else. I think a second screen is really important. I think this is really important for co-working spaces as well, although you tend to see that less. But I think just having a second screen, I think a lot of people that work from home are used to having their laptop and then a second screen. If you can provide that for them, that's great. And I know just this summer when I was doing interviews for the book and stuff, talking to a lot of my friends that were professionals working places. I mean, they were working out of bathrooms, they were working in the kitchen. There just weren't dedicated spaces for this. So I think that if you can do a dedicated office space where you clearly have a desk, the second screen, maybe, just a clipboard or something that would be useful as well if they're trying to pin something up, and you promote that, like you take a really good photo of that and then talk about the different features that you have, that will be to your advantage. What size does the space need to be? People ask me this all the time. We have seen some success in the short term, so the 2-day to 7-day rental market for people that have bigger spaces, but I think that's less appropriate for the medium term space, again, because they're not necessarily coming with kids. It's probably singles or a couple. So for this model, I would recommend buying anything between a studio to a 3-bedroom. Now you might be thinking a studio, that's a condo. Am I going to have a problem with the HOA? Usually if you're doing a 3-month or longer tenant, you're going to be okay with HOAs. And a lot of the HOAs are 1 month or more. So if you are in a condo, you're going to be looking at the city level. Can I rent for 30 days or more? And the HOA level. Can I rent for 30 days or more? The reason why I talked about 90 days is because a lot of the HOAs adopt a 90-day strategy, or a 90-day limitation, I should say. So just make sure you check that if you're going like the studio or the 1-bedroom route and you're in a condo. Just make sure that you see what their limits are. And I find that a lot of people do rent for 3 months. I actually don't find that to be that big of a deal. If your condo or HOA association has a 6-month clause, I would worry about that and not necessarily invest in that property. But not too big, studio to 3-bedroom. The reason why I'm recommending a 3-bedroom is because if it's a couple, they will use the space some different ways. The first is that maybe they have a dedicated bedroom, a dedicated office, and then a room for friends and family to visit, because typically they're doing these in cool areas and their friends and family might come to see what the life is like there. The second way they would use this is they have a dedicated bedroom and then they have one office for each person. So that's how we're seeing, we have actually seen last year the popularity of 3-bedrooms going up, and I think it's because of this. So really your space doesn't need to be too big, but it, again, studio to 3-bedroom. I would say really avoid something with a yard, just because as an investor, it's a lot of maintenance. You can have a small space that is fenced in, and we'll talk about the advantages to that in the future. But I think, again, these people, typically it's like a working vacation. So they really don't want to have a lot of maintenance on a yard. And if you listen to our podcast, you know anything about me, I do not like yards. I think they're expensive and hard to manage. And I think water costs are only going to cost more in the future. So I usually advise clients to avoid that sort of setup. Anybody that's looking to invest in the medium term space, to avoid that as well, because it's expensive, it's timely, and they're not going to want it either. However, the final note is, I know before I mentioned a lot of these people probably don't have kids, but they have fur babies. And so if you allow animals, that's going to be really attractive to them. And if that renter has somewhere that they can easily let the animal out to use the restroom without having to walk them all the time, that also will be attractive. So if you can find a small space or a small townhome or something with a fence that's not too big, that is going to be very appealing to anyone that's coming in with a dog. And then finally, I know I talked about cars. They're not probably going to bring in 2, so you don't necessarily need 2 spaces for cars, but you need 1, and it needs to be 1 dedicated. It doesn't necessarily need to have a cover or be heated or anything else, but it should be something more than street. And again, these are all suggestions. They're best practices. It's like if you're looking for an investment, these are the things that you want to look for. But if you already own a property and they hit 80% of what I'm suggesting, but they don't have a parking space, I would absolutely say go for it. I'm really just talking about it in a perfect scenario. These are the things that I'd recommend. So what kind of areas are these medium-term renters looking for? I think they are looking for quality of life situations. I do all of my real estate out of Colorado. I live in Colorado. I've lived in Colorado since I was 8 years old. So I feel very passionate about what our state has to offer, and I fully understand why people would want to be here. It's like great weather, great outdoor activities, bars, night scene, etc. And I would say just wherever you decide to do your investment, I do think that this is important and a little bit less negotiable than the other things that I've talked about in a property. You want them to have a reason to want to be there. I mean, I think some people move to be close to family, certainly, but I think with this kind of tenant, they want something that's attractive to go to. They're not moving to a city for no reason. They're moving because they think that city or that location is cool. So try to be near something that's appealing. Where to find these medium-term renters. I source most of mine from Furnished Finders. I really like Furnished Finders. They have been in this space for a really long time. In the past, it's where a lot of traveling nurses source their rentals. You're starting to see that expand into other markets. I like Furnished Finders for a couple of reasons. It's only $99 a year, so it's significantly cheaper than Airbnb, which is 3% of all rentals that you do. So that's really nice. It's just $99 upfront. Even if they bump that up, it's probably still cheaper than Airbnb, as long as Furnished Finders doesn't go with a percentage model as well. The second is that it tends to be a little less sophisticated. So a lot of the people in there are putting like their own photos on versus having professional photos. So you just have a lot less competition, and then you can really stand out if you're very responsive in your emails and whatnot. And then finally, they're less aggressive than Airbnb. Sometimes when I rent on Airbnb or I host on Airbnb, I get really tired of the algorithm like pinging me all the time to like wish someone happy birthday and make sure they have the door code and everything else. It's just obnoxious. And Furnished Finder doesn't do any of that. In fact, you do your lease outside of Furnished Finder. So I love Furnished Finder for all of those reasons. But having said that, I think Airbnb is going to take over this market. And the reason for that is because Airbnb is starting to see these 28, they do a 28 plus day rental. I say a 30 plus day rental for city reasons, but they're really, really leaning into this space. You're starting to see them write content about it, have checklists for it, advertise. Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb, got up in the past year and was saying, you know, for the entire duration of the company's time, only 10% of their renters were these 28 plus day rentals. And then in COVID, they added an additional 15%. So right now, 25% of the people looking for properties are looking for these extended furnished rentals. They're paying attention to this trend. They're starting to build content around this trend. And so Airbnb absolutely, I think, will be dominating this market. But I mentioned Airbnb because a lot of my clients think that Airbnb is only for short-term rentals. And that's just not true. You just extend, the amount of stay for your calendar dates or for your limitation on how long people can rent for Airbnb, and people will find you that way. We get clients that way all the time. We just prefer not to because Airbnb takes that 3% versus Furnished Finders $99 per year. All right, I think that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed this video. I thank you again for seeking out this content and watching if you've come this far. If you enjoyed this video, I would love a like. Even better than that would be subscribing. If you want more content on this subject, I definitely plan on continuing to roll out videos around this just because I really do feel like this is the future. Thanks again for watching this video.